Okay, folks, we'll call the meeting to order, and I'd like to start off with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, Seleks, and Senex peoples, and is home to Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land, rivers, and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. There are no late items, and I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Councillor Charlwood and Councillor Woodward. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Public participation. Don't have any. Presentations and delegations, and the first one is Nelson Hoops Association. Jeremy Phelan, President of the Nelson Hoops Association, is presenting to Council with regard to the association and its Lakeside Park outdoor basketball court redevelopment proposal. Jeremy, you have the floor, my friend.
Okay, I'm just going to share this presentation. All right. Are you guys able to see that first slide there?
We got it, yes.
Yep. Okay, great. Okay, thank you for allowing me to come present to you guys. My name is Jeremy, LVR alumni. Live in Nelson for most of my life, and I run Nelson Hoops Association. We're looking to get some upgrades to the basketball courts down at Lakeside. So without further ado, I'm going to give you guys a bit of a background quickly. So I don't have much time. I've got lots of slides to go through about Nelson Hoops. And then I'm going to go through a little bit of a quick survey about courts in Nelson. And then we'll get to the project about Lakeside. So Nelson Hoops registered as a nonprofit back in 2013. We deliver basketball programming in Nelson. Anything basketball related is welcome to kind of run through Nelson Hoops. We largely operate out of school district 8 gyms. About 70% of our participants are from Nelson, the remaining are in RDCK. We run youth leagues from 6 to 14 years old. We run a club team that operates much kind of like a rep team that travels regionally. We run camps in the spring and summer, coaching clinics. We have a scholarship fund in Blair D'Andrea's name. We also run the annual alumni tournament, LVR, and we also have a men's league, 4 teams in Nelson, 4 in the South Kootenay. We've been running the youth program since 2017. We run a fall and a winter season. We run a junior league for ages 6 to 9 at Hume and 10 to 14 at LVR. We have greater than 200 active members pre-COVID. And we actually use alumni and players as coaches and reps for their co-op credit hours at school. We also have parents and alumni involved. We run the Kootenay Chill is our rep program, which I said travel regionally for those looking for more competition. We run that April to June. The men's league in Nelson, we have 4 teams. We run October to March. We run out of LVR. We have sponsors in the community supporting us. Prior to COVID, we actually had a men's league tournament slated for LVR, and unfortunately got canceled. So we're gonna run that next time when it's safe to do so. So my court proposal for Lakeside. So why are we doing it? Well, we're looking to provide amenities that are accessible to everybody. Looking to redevelop something that's closer to regulation in a centralized location. Why are we doing it? Because as you'll see, I'll go through a quick survey of courts in Nelson. Not one outdoor court is regulation, whether it's the court or the rims. We'd like to push this forward and try and get something going this fall and potentially finish in the spring if need be. And I'll show you the location is proposed actually where the Bocce courts are with the Talent Society, and we've engaged them to work together to see if we can get their courts moved. And how are we going to do this? Well, we need We've engaged some stakeholders such as the Italian Society, the local business community. I'm presenting now to you, the City of Nelson, to get support. I've presented a Rec Council 5, which I will be requesting a formal support from, and I've engaged Columbia Basin Trust. Nelson Hoops is also, we did a change.org petition. We received over 1,200 signatures to support the project. When I drive by there to work every morning, evening, there's always people playing down there. So I think that there's demand for court space. So like I said, we're looking to put them in, after engaging kind of an informal meeting with some city staff members. We've decided that the best location would probably be where the bocce lanes are. So I discussed that with the Italian Society, and they penned a letter of support to us, pending in-kind support and obviously a place for them to relocate. We decided to use the location because of existing amenities like the fence, the lights, and we're looking to put 4 to 6 rims so that we can get more access instead of 2 courts, and we're looking to at least get 1 full regulation court in there. So this is the plan that we're proposing. You'll see on the right of the tennis courts is where we're proposing to put a court, and then proposing to put the new bocce courts potentially immediately next to ours. These are renderings of the courts and the bocce lanes. And so why are we pushing this? Well, I kind of realized that, pre-COVID, during COVID, like we were totally at the whim of the school districts being inside. So when it came to coming, trying to play outside, we didn't have many options. The courts, like I said, none of regulation. All the indoor courts are either School District 8 or Selkirk College, and hoops courts not dimensionally correct, and there's demand. So when the courts were put in at Lakeside, we think that there wasn't any consultation with the basketball community. They put them where they did to minimize so that they didn't impede on the tennis courts. The stanchions and the nets, the tennis courts obstruct our courts. We can't play full. The courts are set so that the fence actually impedes on them. And there are hazards there, such as wires in the fence. And they're just dimensionally incorrect so that we can't actually play. You can't maximize the number of players playing at one point in time. And so this is my kind of survey just to show that in Nelson, we don't really have any regulation basketball amenities. So at Lions Park, it's a public park, presume. It's by essentially a daycare. It's not necessarily for adults, I would say. The court is short. The hoops are short. It's definitely a hazard having the pavement that doesn't go all the way past the stanchion. Hume, this is where I played growing up, and most people did, I think, as well. But the court is sloped. The hoops are not regulation, and obviously 2 of the hoops are elementary height. South Nelson, again, sloping grade, a lot of gravel, just not really regulation. Great for elementary school kids, I guess, just to go out and play. Same with their courts in the back, dimensionally incorrect. There's stairs right there. There's hazards, not regulation height. Same with Rosemont, again, elementary school. These are on school district properties, so I guess they cater to the demographic that's using them. Similar to Lakeside, Trafalgar Court, they place the hoops so that they don't impede on the tennis courts. They're far too long to actually play a full court game, and the hoops are often in disrepair. LVR, up where they've put the new tennis club in their courts. Clearly, the basketball court was an afterthought. Court is cut off. The hoops aren't necessarily regulation, and there's hazards there impeding the court space. So at Lakeside, like I mentioned, the tennis nets and the stanchions from the one tennis court impede the court. It's far too long, and the fence line is a bit too close, and the 3-point line is cut off. There's also the fence line, which is so close, like I said, has sharp wire sticking out of it in places. So we've proposed with our core proposal, there's going to be maintenance after it's done. We anticipate that the maintenance is minor, cleaning and sweeping or pressure washing the court. If we decide to put a sport court tile down, the tiles may need to be replaced. The hoop equipment may need, maintenance at times, and the lights. I don't think it's, I think the LED lights that KLE has proposed probably go in. They won't need much maintenance. I think they'll run for a long time. And we've proposed that we'd be willing to partner to support the maintenance. Nelson Hoops Association would. So we would like I said, we'd like to propose, if we can get support from the city and other organizations, we'd like to at least break ground for 2021 in the fall. But of course, this is contingent on funding, the in-kind contributions from the business community, contractor availability, city support, and stakeholder support. I have, like I said, I presented to Rec Council Plat, and back in May, I think I had some positive feedback, and I just need to get request formal support from them. I've met with city staff. We have a preliminary idea of what we think might work. The Italian Society has penned a letter to us. The Rotary Society Nelson Rotary has penned a letter in support of the project. And I have had preliminary talks with Columbia Basin Trust. The in-kind support for the project would come from Furious Construction as the general contractor. They'd be donating their time. Selkirk Paving has agreed to help with surfacing, Rona with the fence, Goody Lake Electrical with lighting and electrical, and Case Contractor with the site prep and grading, and Warden Engineering if we need any surveying done. Our cost breakdown is extremely conservative. We asked for commercial quotes from all those involved. And as you'll see, it comes to about just under $175,000. Keep in mind that doesn't account for in-kind support. So this is our breakdown of equipment, materials, labor, and Furious Construction has put together a Gantt chart for the project timeline. As I said, I had engaged Columbia Basin Trust. They kind of laid out some options. I would like to discuss this more with the city if they decide it's something that perhaps we can pursue, and other funding options if I can be pointed in the right direction. CBT did indicate that they want to see three things for a project like this. They want to see that there's support in the community and that there's a need. So here, they would like to see that there's an impact on youth recreation, which I think Nelson Hoops Association kind of presents. I think there is a need in growing the sport here. The municipality, so they wanted to see that the city of Nelson was on board with this, and thirdly, that the business community would be on board, so that an institution or an organization like CBT wouldn't be left holding the bag or the only funder here. So I just want to thank you guys for the time. If you have any questions or comments, happy to field them.
Thanks, Jeremy. All right, we're off. Councillor Woodward, then Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me, Jeremy?
I can.
Great. So thank you for your presentation, and I think you laid out a pretty good case there. And seeing all those images of the sort of not regulation basketball hoops, I never really thought about that, but I've seen many around town, but they aren't really that functional as you showed for a real basketball game. I'm wondering at the end of it all, if it all happens, who owns the court after? Who's responsible for the upkeep? Is that the city? would you say?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's something that, would need to be negotiated. I'm not exactly sure how this works. I'm not expecting the city to donate land to us. But I think that Nelson Hoops, we have so much support for this project, and I get so many questions about it, and everybody asks me if I need any help. And I know that we have a lot of solid alumni here and other people in the community that, like I mentioned in the PowerPoint, I think we would be willing to take on a lot of the maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
If need be.
And Councilor Woodward, if I could, I mean, if we think about the build itself would be the cost basically on this. Once you had your, there could be some fence repair. Again, you might need to replace a backboard, but in most part of having that foundation placed and paving and the fence up, the maintenance, like I said, would be sweeping, maybe power washing or kind of maybe some painting or that sort of thing, but shouldn't be too onerous, I would say. But it is a great question for council to always be aware of. But in this particular circumstance, I'm not thinking that there's a huge amount of upkeep. And again, when you have an organization, but again, we've seen before where organizations are strong now. And I mean, even currently, they've done a good cleanup job down at the Bocce courts, but they were not looking so great for a number of years. So, so I appreciate the questions and the concerns.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for your presentation. I come from a basketball family, so I'm most definitely a supporter and appreciate the effort and agree with you that there's a demand. I've toured all of those hoops that you've shown and, wobbled on the uneven pavement and tried to teach our kids to shoot hoops in really precarious situations, which I think in the end will make them better basketball players. My question to you is about the costs. So you itemized all of your in-kind support, and then you've got your costs. I'm assuming that those costs, you referenced it, but I'm not clear. Would there be a higher cost if you didn't have those in-kind donations, or is that the total cost, and then it will actually cost you less because you've got some in-kind?
Yeah, so that is essentially what I did. Was I asked all of those potential contributors for commercial quotes as if they were to bid on this project.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't account for their in-kind contributions, because that could be, it could fluctuate with timeline, availability, season, whatever. So I will be following up with them once we maybe get the ball rolling on this project, if it goes, to maybe hammer down what they're willing to contribute to the project. So I think the $175,000 is
Worst case.
essentially a commercial quote for it is the worst case for this
Great.
project. Furious Construction they will donate all of their general contracting, so they will not be charging the project a dime. There's obviously tax included in the price, which is a lot. And like my hopes would be that we would be coming around like perhaps 30% of that cost, just based on my preliminary talks with all these businesses.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy.
Further questions? Councillor Renwick?
Thanks, Jeremy. Great presentation. I think you checked off a lot of boxes here, and basketball is near and dear to my heart, as you very well know, and it's a great sport in that you don't need a lot. You need a pair of shoes, and that's that. And so relatively high participation. I really like the fact that you have engaged with the Canadian Italian Society on the bocce courts, and I know that you've talked to Mike from Nelson Minor Baseball, but I don't know if you've knocked on the Raptors' door, much like Nelson Minor Baseball did with the Blue Jays. I don't know if they've got funding available for something like this, but just something to consider. That's all. Thanks so much.
Yeah, that question, I know that question came up. So sources of funding for, say, a capital project like this, with Canada Basketball, Raptors, I did some research online, and it doesn't appear that there's anything available, at least publicly. balanced out making a couple phone calls to see if it's something that they would be willing to consider donations to. I don't know. That's something that once I have a bit more certainty about the direction of this thing, that I'd be looking into.
Jeremy, thanks for the presentation. It was great again for the second time. And I love the project. I was just a quick question. Does the cost breakdown include moving the bocce court?
So with the bocce courts, you know, the demolition and say regrading that would have to happen, we're proposing that it be done in concert with ours. So if there's it's going to be based on preliminary discussions, and they're preliminary, that if we were to put the courts right next to the basketball court, the bocce courts, that we would be doing all the site prep at the same time, and we'd probably be helping them with demo.
Okay, and to be clear, you're covering all of those costs, the Nelson Hoops Association and your partners? Yes?
Well, we haven't gotten that far in discussions with them. What they agreed to pen a letter of support, pending some level of in-kind support from the city and us on that. So we can be sure that when we break ground for our project, that they will have all of their site prep done, and we're not going to cost out their project to rebuild, but we're happy to work with them and support them on that.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Page.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I agree with my colleagues around the table. It sounds like a great project. As far as I understand it, we need to refer this to a business meeting to get to a point where we are given a license to occupy down at the courts, and say at the very least that we would permit such a build out to happen, which is going to open the door for them to go collect the letters of support from Rec 5 and the rule, so show that multiple local government support, and go to CBT to see if those capital grants through the Basin Plays program can be got, and collect the funds to do the build out. So I would like to move that we do refer this to a fairly upcoming short-term business meeting, so that they can get a clear signal from us that this is an appropriate land use, and we can do better when it comes to courts in the city, and then they can continue to look for those monies and put that funding together, knowing that there's a spot and we're okay with that spot.
Thank you.
We have a mover and a seconder for that. A question I have, Jeremy, is, and thanks very much for putting this together, but when I looked at your presentation, I thought to myself, what if you put 174,000 into all of those other courts that needed some upgrades? What would that look like? Like, we'll end up with a new court here
Sure.
and some upgrades to the ones beside it, which are technically tennis courts converted to basketball, or you can argue vice versa. But
Yeah.
if you wanted to sort of accommodate multiple parts of our community, what if we had a partnership, say, with School District Number 8, the city, yourselves, CBT, and maybe upgrade some of the current ones that could accommodate
Yep.
multiple, like Rosemont, Uphill, Gyro, Fairview.
Yeah, and I've had feedback from the community, saying, "Hey, what about some other places and other courts?" I did send some emails out to the school district. I was pointed towards, say, for example, I had an idea for Trafalgar. I mean, it's the only other flat court other than Lakeside out of all of those that I presented, right? And dimensionally correct, but at least the hoops are in. And I didn't receive any response from within the school. So I love the idea. In a sense, you get more bang for your buck. There's more kids impacted, and this is a legacy project for the youth. I'm done my basketball career. I love to go play once in a while, but this is something so that the kids growing up are going to have something better to play on. So I'm totally open to the idea. I know that Rec Council 5 proposed, or suggested that maybe we do a regional survey of basketball amenities in the area, and I think that would that might give us a better leg to stand on if we're approaching the school district with a proposal to upgrade the courts.
Yeah, it was just my thought that maybe,
Yeah, that's a good thought.
like you say, bang for your buck, and I can see that you're very much open to that, Jeremy. So on your behalf, we could potentially, I mean, I'd be happy to approach the school district, the chair, if you wished, and just see what happened to your request, and maybe, if we threw the whole works in the middle of a table here at some point, we might come up with something that would upgrade all of these courts to a point where more youth will be impacted closer to home.
Yep. I agree.
Councillor Lockenberg, and then Councillor Charwood.
I love the idea of upgrading the other courts, and something we should pursue, I think, even regardless of what happens with this one. The one question I would have about that idea is the potential for tournaments, and what this court does that, say, upgrading the existing courts wouldn't do for hosting bigger tournaments. Can you speak to that? Like, because you've got two courts side by side, you can imagine a tournament sort of experience. What do you think about that?
Yeah, this is something we struggle with even inside. And I mean, how we've grown over the years with Nelson Hoops and our youth leagues, we've had to actually expand into other schools, and now we use Hume. We're kind of bursting at the seams using the courts at LVR, even indoors, and the outdoor courts. Like I said, we don't. There's nowhere where we could even run our club program, which I would love to do instead of being in a gym, in a school district gym in the spring and the summer. It'd be great to have the kids outside. I love the idea of running a men's league tournament at Lakeside. I think it's a great place to host something like that if we had courts available. It'd be great to get outside in the spring and summer when we're playing basketball instead of being in the gym. Like any tournament, like I said, we had 7 other teams committed to come to our men's league tournament, which is going to be hosted at LVR April 2020. That's a pretty good tourism boost for a weekend, and probably a lot of bodies and excitement going on down at Lakeside. So.
Yeah, I noticed in your presentation, like you're definitely using those other courts presently, regardless of the condition. It's just a thought. Who like you say,
I
bang for the
definitely.
buck, it might.
I think that before there were courts at Lakeside, there was much more use at the other courts. I think a lot of the use goes down at Lakeside now just because there are 10-foot rims. The court surface is flat. It's not dimensionally correct, but it's a lot better than playing at some of the other schools, I think.
And
Jeremy,
they've
it's
got
the best of the worst.
Well, and they have lights at night, right? So that's a big ththing, and that's one of
They
the, I
have
think
lights
one
at
of the
night,
features for this one as well is that the posts being where they are, we got lights on the other side of the posts, and now you've got a longer time frame to be able to use them at Lakeside.
Can I just say one thing? I think Nicole.
I was next, yeah.
Yes.
Well, and that was going to be my comment, is the tournaments, the lights, and why does it have to be one or the other, right? This could be phase one, and then why couldn't this organization then looking for funding to improve the, once they've demonstrated this huge demand for basketball that we all know is there, they could then roll their next project into upgrading the other courts. I'd love to see all of that happen.
Yeah, thank you. I see this as a pilot project.
Yeah.
We've never done anything like this before, and clearly nobody in Nelson has either. I see for our organization, if we could get something off the ground here, then, we would be looking forward onto like the next project.
Jeremy, could I ask you one more question? Is there as much tennis played down there as there used to be since LV Rogers opened, or, because I'm not sure. I know the tennis courts closed at the golf course.
It certainly
Yeah.
gets used, Mayor, and I mean, as a person that lives down there, so it's one of the things that I see. The other part too is pickleball is also there, and then in particular the sort of 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 with the high school kids on either end on the basketball sort of side. But the two courts that are kind of the doubles that are closer there, we do see them being used as well. And again, sort of that public, open to the public and not part of a club. I mean, it's been fantastic, as you know, what Dr. Bridger and their crew had done up at LVR, and it's really something as well.
Thank you.
Just one
Go ahead,
quick.
Jess.
Yeah, there.
Sorry, I was going to say one quick comment was that, we did this pilot with the disc golf, and that's a very low barrier, cheap, family friendly asset now. And I kind of see this as the same way, like Councilor Renwick was saying, it's very low barrier and anyone can do it. And I think, and if we upgraded around town, which shouldn't, it's not a huge expense like you were saying, Colin, because these are, it's fairly basic. You provide that asset of low barrier sports for people, and I think that's an important part of our community.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much, Jeremy. Could
Thank you guys so much.
Put a few of those 5-foot hoops in there for me.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Is it not referred?
Thank
So
you.
just my processes, I'm thinking it would be probably a September business meeting that we, yes, okay, yeah, so
Okay.
not planning to get this done the next couple of weeks.
Thanks. Take care, Jeremy.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
One more box ticked.
Another one.
All right, next up is the active transportation update. And Sebastian.
Hello
That's a
again.
heck of a good meal. You gotta be a little quicker off the draw there, my friend.
He was taking pictures of bicycles.
You could have been with us. You could have been with us.
Just told I had to go back to
Out?
work.
Take the door.
Yeah, maybe just briefly, as part of the active transportation plan implementation this year, we have presented some ideas of different items that we want to bring forward this year, and kind of asking the community what they thought about the reducing speed limits in town was one of those items. And so the first thing we decided to do is go through a thought exchange and kind of ask the question, what do you think about the current speed limit? Is it safe? And also through that thought exchange, we asked the question, are you in favor or not to reduce the speed limit to 30 kilometers an hour as a pilot throughout the community? So the idea, where is this coming from? And I think reducing speed along local streets is gaining momentum in Canada. Recently, Vancouver, Surrey, Calgary, and there's some other municipalities that have piloted reducing the speed. And the idea is that it's just, there's a lot of benefits. Main one is safer streets. And in the case of a collision with a pedestrian, if a vehicle driving at 30 kilometers an hour, there's a 90% chance of survival versus 50 kilometers an hour. It goes down to 15%.
Excuse me, Sebastian.
Yes.
Are you able to put that on the screen?
I don't think so, not quickly.
I think I can.
Oh, okay.
Give me one,
Yeah, because the public,
okay.
and this is what this is about. It's the public, right?
Stats.
Oh, I'm on. That's just leave it there.
Just
The next hour and a half.
The John Show.
you're not supposed to say the quiet part out
Yeah,
loud.
I can see it.
Here, I'm just gonna
Thanks, sir.
just let me see.
Rocket. Nice.
Boom.
There we go.
Okay,
Can you
great.
move it, Sebastian?
Yeah, I should be able to, yeah, there we go.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sebastian. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So that was a question we went to the community, and this was done back in March, and we posted the results back on Facebook and on other social media platforms that the city uses. And this was the first time slot available to bring this to council.
Sebastian, I got a few answers to that first question that we couldn't put in print here.
Okay.
What do you think about the current speed limit? There's a lot of opinions on that one.
There's a lot of opinions and, oops, let me just go back here. Okay, there we go. So in fact, 327, we had 327 participants, which was the highest until we've recently passed that. We're getting more and more successful with these consultation. And, you know, through that program, you have thoughts and then you rate them and I'll show you what we can do with them. But in essence, it's pretty typical, you know, mostly people from Nelson responded. Most of the people that responded were drivers. And age group is pretty typical. You get that 36 and 35 and above crowd. So those basically automatically generated a word cloud. So it takes all the ideas and kind of, like, for example, if crosswalk comes out often as a word, it just gets bigger. So that's kind of the idea, is that, you know, you kind of get a sense of the theme with one image. So really enforcement, flashing lights, crosswalk, so that speaks to infrastructure. And in terms of some of the key themes that came out of this exchange, so the star score, I call it, like, you know, popularity index. So in terms of the three top themes, basically better infrastructure, enforcement, and no issues with current speed limit were the three things that really came out, and you know, the most popular one being better infrastructure. So then you can dissect it a little further by the number of thoughts under each of these categories. So that now it kind of switches over. The most common theme that was talked about was enforcement. So enforcement in terms of speed, and also mentioning some illegal parking and other such illegal activities. So these are just kind of snippets of some of the thoughts that came out. And in terms of better infrastructure, what that means, these are some of the top ones. Crosswalk needs to be bolder, brighter paint, flashing lights. Traffic engineering is terrible. So, you know, you kind of get that stuff too. You know, they remember certain works that they haven't really liked. But in essence, what I'm seeing here is, you know, pedestrian crossings sometimes could be, you know, a little more obvious to avoid some of the potential dangers or near collisions. In terms of enforcement, you know, some people are saying 40 is plenty slow. So our current speed limit is 40 kilometers an hour. But it's more so about enforcing it. And I think one of the general themes that I was reading was that it's one thing to bring the speed limit down to 30 kilometers an hour, but are you actually going to be enforcing it? So that was kind of something that came out of this ThoughtExchange. And again, there's quite a few people that thought 40 is good enough. You know, they don't feel that 30 will reduce any accidents. They're claiming distractions, things like that. So there's other issues than just the speed limit. So in terms of the actual question, would you want to reduce the speed limit? So, you know, a good majority, so 54% said no. But the beauty of ThoughtExchange versus just a yes/no survey is you can dig in a bit deeper and kind of see, okay, well, within the people that don't want to do it and those that really want to do it, what are things they rated high on both ends? So then you get the kind of common themes that come out. And I think, again, enforcement is one of the key ones here. So in conclusion, I don't think that blanket 30 kilometers an hour is necessarily something that the community, anyways, through this exchange, were in favor. Some are, but I would definitely be inclined to say not the majority. So it doesn't mean that we don't have any other opportunities. I think I read through this ThoughtExchange that, you know, let's consider 30 kilometers an hour along certain designated active transportation corridor, which we're starting to do, school zones and proximity to park. And I think people were saying, well, if you put it everywhere, then you take away from these important zones. So that's a good point. And also, as you saw earlier, infrastructure was something that came up often. So better and safer intersection treatments in known problematic areas. So, we know there's some areas that it's a little difficult if you're a pedestrian, especially in the downtown area, but other important pedestrian corridor where, we could potentially increase, the safety margin through better infrastructure. And we did that as part of our bike route project as well. So there's some good examples there. Additional enforcement, so that can be done through speeding and parking tickets, but it can also be done through education. And one thing that seems to be pretty successful is our speed reader boards. They're pretty great. We can actually get data from them, and I'm just starting to look at the data on the high street to compare pre and post speed humps just to see if there's actually an implication there and if it works. So, we could consider, I think we have 2 right now and we move them around, but I don't think it would be a bad thing in the long run, in the short term to maybe get a couple more of those because they seem to really catch your eye. And I would argue that most people that see that blinking light will naturally slow down, and then it kind of trains you to know that it's coming up. So I think, those are kind of solutions instead of relying on a police officer to be there all the time because we know it's pretty expensive. Those are other enforcement or, educational procedures. So in terms of treatments, speed humps can really help in some cases to make the pedestrians a little more visible and really reduces their crossing distance. So pedestrian refuge island, we've just completed one today, just at the entrance of the bike route project. So it's basically, as you're crossing, if it's a wide road, there's a middle ground where you can stand there safely and make sure that somebody else is seeing you, especially when you have a treed boulevard. It's not so obvious for the people in the other lane to see you. So those are things that they're not necessarily cheap, but as we improve our infrastructure, those are things to consider. So it becomes a new way at looking at our pedestrian infrastructure. So I guess I wanted to report back to council because it was a work plan item, and the question was, essentially looking at piloting 30 kilometers an hour. Based on this consultation, I would say maybe it's not what we need as a blanket, blanket speed limit, but really look at it specifically to certain corridors and where we know there's certain issues. We're kind of getting experience in different types of active transportation infrastructure that we could do to help out in some of those key sections. So I just want to share that with council tonight. So there's no formal recommendation per se, but I'd be happy to entertain any questions or thoughts or comments.
Thanks, Sebastian. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Lochtenberg.
Thank you, Sebastian, for that. I'm interested in a couple of the assumptions that go into the conclusions. One of them is that, some of these questions imply a certain amount of knowledge about how things work. So for example, on enforcement, as a city, we don't have a lot of control over what police are doing to enforce. I think we can make suggestions in the police board. We can't tell, we can't tell the police where they should be enforcing, can we? Or can we?
We could highlight certain places
That we
where there's
think are-
challenges, regardless of what it is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's something to note in terms of, moving to solution. Like the public just doesn't have enough information to recommend a solution to a problem. So I just want to highlight that. The second thing is, the one thing I think that can change how people think about this is not the absolute number, about 30, 40, 50 kilometer an hour, but it's about how far over the speed limit you're currently traveling. So for example, if you're 50 kilometers over, or traveling at 50, you're 20 kilometers over the speed limit. That puts you outside of that comfort zone of 10 kilometers above the speed limit that I think most people are able to feel comfortable at, right? Like I'm in a 40 kilometer, 50 kilometer an hour zone. I'm feeling okay to go 10K above without too much worry. But man, if it's 30 and I'm 20 over, then things start to look pretty serious if I get caught. And so there's something to that we should keep in mind, that it didn't sound like that got considered in the ThoughtExchange. That, it's about how far over the speed limit you are in terms of modifying behavior. The other thing I want to caution about this thought exchange related to those two items is, in general, as a public, you know, the people that get passionate about these kinds of things are the ones most likely to respond and engage. Whereas if you're like, yeah, I think it's a good idea, you're not going to get over the hump of getting involved. So we've got probably a skewed sample of who's participated in this thought exchange. And I don't know if thought exchange itself has a way to correct for that, but we should keep that in mind, that in general, the overall effect is 30K. You have an overall dampening, which I think the data shows that you do get a certain dampening down. Then probably overall, a lot of people are having a different opinion of it. Like, oh, this is pretty good. I feel a little bit more safe walking or biking without necessarily ascribing it to a specific thing, if you see what I mean. So just wanted to highlight those things.
I absolutely agree. You know, consultation is part of our job, and you know, there's it's never perfect, right? Because you often get the extremes, and the middle ground that agrees with it sometimes won't take the time to acknowledge it. But I think, you know, there's still some merits. I mean, this is a sample of the population, but there's still some merits there. And I think what I was hearing, and I tend to agree with it, is that just by starting to post 30 kilometers an hour might not necessarily slow vehicles down. So I think what people are saying is there's probably, if you're really trying to achieve like, making our roads safer for all users, a blanket speed limit might not be the best approach, is what I'm hearing. And based on what I'm seeing in other larger cities, they're really piloting it in like smaller neighborhoods. In many we're actually ahead of the curve because our speed limit is 40 kilometers an hour. So we are ahead of a lot of municipalities. I think most municipalities are at 50 and now they're like jumping down to 30. I think, you know, we're still ahead, and I think where we're going is, you know, as we work on these active transportation corridor and primary bike route and primary pedestrian route, we bring those to 30 kilometers an hour, and that's like, I think that's the good starting point, and then it really emphasizes that those corridors are a bit different. But I don't disagree with your comments for sure. Like we have to weigh, you know, public opinion's important, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the science or the ideas behind this aren't valid. Yeah.
Sebastian, on that note then, before I go to Councillor Page, if we were asking, which we did, about the speed limit, like how do you, as somebody that's answering it, put that into context of what our overall goal is?
Yeah. Well, and part of the thought exchange is there is a preamble to it.
Yeah.
We explain why we're asking, and then we give out, we gave a little bit like you have in your RFD, there's some key thoughts of why we're doing it and who else is doing it. So we give the context. If people choose to read it or agree with it, that's a whole different story. But we do give a reason why we're asking that, because that's important. If not, you know, they don't have the context to answer the question.
Thank you. Councillor Page.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have two questions here, and I'm going to start with the first one, and maybe it's in that preamble. But as we track, you know, a big piece of Nelson Next is our discussion that we have with the community to identify problems and then identify from the community solutions that we can enact to deal with the oncoming climate crisis. And I wonder, when we put out a thought exchange like this, a blanket 30K, where we identify kind of the open opportunity for people to help us specify what the problems that need to be solved are solved, because I feel this can work against our cross purposes. We already start with a preamble. We already start with a presumption of like 30K. Do you like it? Do you hate it? How do you feel about this specific item? And I wonder how we are engaging the community inside of that Nelson Next framework to say, what are the priorities for you, so that when these are going out, they're aligned, and that there's that public buy-in, and the public feels that these problems are coming from the community, and that the solutions they're engaging with are coming from them, and so there's that buy-in. This particular one, I think, for all its best intentions, did end up being a bit divisive because it was a bit, it was a bit extreme. It's like, hey, blanket 30K. And it didn't give a lot of wiggle room. We got some good stuff about the speed limit and the enforcement, but is it what the community thinks is the most important work that we need to be doing for climate change? And I wonder how we, as staff, figured that this was one of the ones that needed to go out to the community versus maybe some of the other aspirational goals within the Nelson Next framework that we also need public engagement on. And what are the next thought exchanges going to be about, so that we can work with the community more to do that problem solving? I'm sorry if that's long-winded.
Well, I think, as staff, we, I am tasked to implement the active transportation plan. My strategy to make sure it doesn't sit on a shelf over the years is every year I come to the council and I say, here are some of the items that are part of our implementation strategy that you've agreed on in 2019. Here are some ideas of what we could do this year. Are you in favor of that? If so, let me know. And then, so that was presented to council potentially in January. I don't have the exact date. And then that question was, that item was presented to council, and then council agreed to it. So that sets my work plan up for the year. I'm not disagreeing with the other questions are valid, but it's just, we have a lot of questions to ask. And this is part of the work plan that I had brought forward for council. So if council didn't want to necessarily ask that question at that time, I think that would be the time to tell staff, well, you know what, we don't think that's a priority. Let's push it off. We've got other things we want to work on in that field. So that would be, I think, the appropriate venue to do so. So that's where this question comes from. And if you actually read the question, I didn't ask, do you want to limit, are you in agreement with limiting the speed limit to 30? No, we asked the question, what do you think about the current speed limit on local streets? Is it safe and efficient for all road users? Purposely, very general, so that it kind of created that discussion. And and that was kind of the question, because to your point, we didn't want to create that yes or no right away. We wanted to have the dialogue within it. So I hope that answers your questions.
It does. Yeah, no, I do recall the acceptance of the active transportation plan earlier in the year. But I think as we got to this moment, it felt like how the community had the discussion about this particular thought exchange was in the context of Nelson Next a lot more. It was a lot more forefront to their mind, regardless of the nuance of the wording. That's the narrative it came through. And I want to make sure that as we deal with some of these challenges, that the community knows that they're coming along with us and that we're really looking to them to carry this work. And so we have to agree that it's the work we need to work on. The second question is a digital equality piece around the demographics that are responding. And one of the pieces I wanted to point out to council is the 15% for the ages 50 to 65, which, just knowing our population demographic, there's quite a lot of that age group in our community, and they're not hitting this. And it's probably just coming from my work experience. I have a very strong worry that they're having trouble dealing with this technology, and therefore we are not hearing from them because the barrier, the friction is too large. And how are we going to make that easier or help them? If this is the tool, how are we going to help them get on it? Is it the library going to get involved? Are we going to have sessions to teach you how to do this? Can they call a tech support number? But I feel like we're cutting out a group that historically, politically, is actually quite involved. It's one of the most involved times of your life is in your 50s and 60s in politics and what's going on in your community and giving feedback and writing letters. So can we think creatively of how we can? I think those people want to let us know what's going on. I just think they're hitting a technology hurdle, unfortunately.
If I could, a couple of things, so that council remember this is a relatively new product, the ThoughtExchange, right?
Totally.
And we
Yep.
are learning with it. We had big plans for it last year, and COVID kind of threw a wrench into a lot of things. I'm very pleased to see Development Services and others that are starting to pick up more ThoughtExchange. And as he noted, highest participation rate to this report. And then now we know that we've got a higher participation on the next question, right? And so we are looking at, we've signed for another term with this group. So their hope is that as we get better at it and understanding and what questions to ask, and great thought on how do we connect with other people, who are we missing? Because that's one of the things I think is of value about the survey. Because even for any of us, if you make the survey relatively easy to use, you should be able to click in. And again, I would think that group should be pretty strong. The majority of the Facebook users, they should be able to get in there and get on there. So there's some great questions. But what I do appreciate as well is the fact that we even have the data to be able to get that, like, hey, what are we missing? And and as we do to the next level, when we have the next question come along, which I'm sure we share with council, and we see, hey, we're at this, and is that number higher? Is it lower? And so again, there's some things to work on, but I think hoping that there's a good year of the use of the tool, and that, out of that maybe the library needs to put a course on how do I get my communication to council through the ThoughtExchange. They seem to be using it as an avenue.
Alternative
Or an alternative,
at the
for
same
sure.
time.
Yeah.
And to build on that, the under 18, we should go to the schools and have a training program at LVR on how to do a thought exchange.
I think they train us.
Yeah, even better. Certainly introduce them.
We're
Say,
missing
hey,
a lot of cyclists in there too, right? It's mostly car
Well,
drivers,
that's the-
for
that's-
example.
that's
So
not
that was
part
the
of the-
piece that
yeah,
bugged
exactly.
me about the component.
Mostly, right? Like how many people bike a lot, but mostly drive motor vehicles?
So it's
If we're trying to
5%
move
of the-
to cycling,
Well, I know.
right?
So I think there's a lot of merit to what Councillor Page is saying, because 5% of the people rode bikes that answered this. I think that's, when you look at that, you're thinking, why are we even worried about bikes? Let's move on with the motor car and forget the cycling thing. But we're not looking at a short-term thing here. We're looking at a long-term introduction of opportunities for people to take alternate modes of transportation. So in that case,
and again on that, John, just to underline, only 2 people were under 18. If you expanded that, you would see that number of mostly bike go up dramatically.
yeah, it would go up
Yeah.
for sure. And yeah, but where I'm trying to go here is, it's just a snapshot, right?
It is, but at least you've got the data that delineates some of these things,
Absolutely,
right? So
yeah,
then you
no,
can say, well, wait a
absolutely.
second, we're missing all the cyclists.
Exactly.
We need to maybe do something else and make sure that the cyclist group gets it out to their people, right? So I think it's just good information.
Yeah, where I'm
and
trying to
refining.
go though with this, if you don't mind, Sebastian, is that I don't think this should be our first kick, our only kick at this cat. Because we're working towards now with the Edgewood Avenue, High Street corridor, 3rd Street, and so on down with the to accommodate both bicycles and cars. As that sort of evolves, this conversation could be completely different in 12 months.
Absolutely. And maybe just on the numbers, as a planner who's been doing this for a while, 300 people participating to something that is not a controversial rezoning or NIMBYism
Yeah.
is pretty good. Often if you hold an open house and you send mail outs, and maybe 5 people will show up. So I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not perfect, but I always say that it's a step in the right direction. So I think I wouldn't want to discount these results, because I think they do represent, even though it could be better, it's still pretty good, because rarely will we see 300 people come out at an open house session.
Exactly.
And just further to those comments, I think if we continue to use ThoughtExchange, more people will get, so if we're not changing how we're reaching out to people for a longer period of time, we will start to engage those people who haven't figured it out yet. They are more likely to participate long-term if we are consistently using the same
Exactly.
tool to communicate with them.
Yep, no, that's a good point.
Okay, so Sebastian, on that note, my friend, we kept you hanging around here, and all we're going to do is receive this report. But you're getting some good feedback here about, as we go forward, how we sort of work into potentially adjusting the speed limit or not.
Yeah, and I think we're doing a lot in terms of active transportation. I think it's important to highlight that we're since 2019 we've invested quite a bit of money, and we're hoping to continue to do so. So I think it's important to highlight that, yeah, we're moving in the right direction. So, you know, and I think there's some food for thought with this conversation. There's, you know, it gives us a lot of things that we anticipated hearing, but I think it enforces some of the things we could do better.
And on that note, Sebastian, over the last couple of months, I've been learning a lot about walking around this community, and I'm astounded to find out how many sets of stairs there actually are.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And unauthorized pathways that could be opened up potentially to be in, you know, avenues to different parts of our community, shortcuts, etc. And I'm looking forward to at some point that we actually do a bit of a real inventory on those opportunities as well.
Yeah, yeah, we've got all the stairs mapped, but yeah, some of the informal shortcuts,
Yeah.
we definitely, general knowledge, but we don't necessarily have all
Did
of those.
identify the one in Rosemont right off the bat there, the last
Yeah.
time we were here, so.
Yeah,
But there's a number of those.
Desire paths.
But I think Sebastian saying he did some more work on,
Yeah,
on to
excellent, yeah.
delineate that.
Thanks
so
very
good.
much, Sebastian.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
You as well.
Thanks, Sebastian.
So back to work?
Start my second job now, yeah.
Door hit you on the backside.
You got a little light left out
City
there.
Hall.
You can go get some
Welcome aboard. Don't let the door hit you on the way.
Take care.
Thank you. That it?
Yeah.
Council reports? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn, and we still have a couple of things in the closed meeting from Colin and anyone else that wants to throw the 2 cents on the table. All mover and a seconder for adjournment. Do we have one? Councillor Page, Councillor Renwick, all in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. And Sarah will take a moment or two to shut down this everybody here. And I'm not sure if anybody's been monitoring tonight or not, but I tuned in my own stupidity when I was